Right now, at this very second, while you're listening to this, millions of people just hit the snooze button for the third time. Millions more are scrolling through someone else's highlight reel, feeling that quiet ache in their chest, wondering why their life looks nothing like what they imagined at 18. And here's the part that stings. Most of them will do the exact same thing tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that, until one morning they wake up at 55, look in the mirror, and realize they spent 30 years rehearsing for a life they never actually performed. But you're different. I know that because you're here. You didn't click on this by accident. Something inside you. Maybe it's frustration. Maybe it's hunger. Maybe it's that stubborn little voice that refuses to settle. That something brought you here. And I want you to know that instinct is worth more than any degree, any inheritance, any lucky break. Because it means you're ready. Here's what nobody told you in school, what your parents probably didn't know, and what most self-help gurus dance around without ever saying directly. The gap between the person who gets everything they want and the person who spends their whole life wanting, that gap has almost nothing to do with talent. It has nothing to do with where you grew up, what school you went to, or whether the universe decided to sprinkle some magic dust on you at birth. The gap is in how you think, how you move, how you respond when life punches you in the stomach and asks, "What now?" Over the next stretch of time together, I'm going to walk you through the exact frameworks, the daily rituals, and the mental shifts that separate those who rise from those who remain. Not theory, not fluff. Real, tested, actionable blueprints that have been used by people who started with nothing and built everything. But I need something from you first. I need you to treat this like a conversation between two friends, sitting on a rooftop at 2 a.m., being brutally honest with each other, not as background noise while you fold laundry. Because every single principle I'm about to share with you works, but only if you decide right now to actually use it. Deal? Good. Let's go. Chapter 1. Rewiring your mental operating system. Let me ask you something honest. When was the last time you sat down and really examined how you think? Not what you think about. How your mind actually processes the world around you? Most people never do this. They're running on mental software that was installed by their environment before they were old enough to choose it, and they never bothered to check whether that software is actually any good. Here's what I've come to understand after studying people who consistently outperform everyone around them. Success isn't random. It's not a lottery ticket. And it's definitely not reserved for people who were born holding some golden key the rest of us never got. Success is a psychological pattern. It's a way of processing reality that leads to fundamentally different actions, and those different actions produce fundamentally different results. Think about it like this. Imagine two people standing at the edge of the same river. One person stares at the water, overwhelmed by how wide it is, and sits down on the bank to wait for a bridge that might never come. The other person starts looking for stones, fallen logs, shallow spots, anything that could get them across. Same river, same challenge, completely different response. That difference isn't talent. It's mental wiring. The people who consistently get ahead share something that sounds almost too simple to be powerful. They think in processes instead of prizes. When most people want to get fit, they fixate on the number on the scale. They dream about the six-pack, the dress size, the compliment from a friend, and when the scale doesn't move fast enough, they quit. But people who actually transform their bodies, they fall in love with the Tuesday morning run. They find satisfaction in choosing grilled chicken over fried. They build a rhythm that feels like breathing, not punishment. This works in every corner of life. When someone says, "I want to be wealthy," and then spends their evenings watching reality TV, there's a disconnect between their desire and their operating system. They're running a program that says success equals a destination, when it should say success equals a daily route. The person who builds real wealth doesn't obsess over the bank balance. They obsess over the daily habits of value creation, learning a new skill, solving a problem, building something useful. The money shows up as a side effect of a well-designed process. There's another piece of this mental wiring that changed everything for me when I first understood it, and that's your relationship with discomfort. Let me be real with you for a second. Your brain is not designed to make you successful. Your brain is designed to keep you alive. And for most of human history, alive meant comfortable and safe. So your nervous system has this ancient alarm system that screams danger every time you try to do something unfamiliar, something risky, something that pushes you beyond what you already know. That alarm goes off when you think about starting a business. It goes off when you consider having a difficult conversation. It goes off when you're about to publish your first piece of writing or apply for a job that feels slightly out of your league. And most people obey that alarm. They retreat to safety. They tell themselves, maybe next year, or I'm not ready yet. And they genuinely believe it. But the people who build extraordinary lives, they hear that same alarm and walk toward it. Not because they're fearless, nobody is fearless, but because they've learned that the alarm is almost always lying. The things that feel dangerous are rarely dangerous. They're just unfamiliar. And here's what's beautiful about this. Every time you walk toward that discomfort instead of away from it, you teach your brain a new lesson. You teach it that unfamiliar doesn't mean unsafe. And over time, your threshold expands. Things that terrified you 6 months ago become Tuesday. Things that seem impossible right now will feel routine by next year. But only if you keep walking toward the alarm instead of away from it. There's one more piece of this mental operating system I want to talk about, and it might be the most important one. It's about where you place control. Some people genuinely believe that their life is shaped by forces outside themselves. Luck, timing, other people's decisions, the economy, their upbringing. And look, I'm not going to pretend those things don't matter. Of course they do. But here's the critical distinction. The people who get ahead treat those things as weather conditions, not prison walls. Weather conditions affect your journey, sure. A storm might slow you down, force you to take a detour, make the road harder. But weather doesn't determine your destination. You still choose where you're going. You still decide whether to keep driving or pull over and park permanently. The people who park permanently are the ones who say, well, it's raining, so I guess I can't get there. The people who arrive are the ones who say, it's raining, I need a better route. This isn't toxic positivity. I'm not telling you to ignore real obstacles or pretend everything is sunshine. I'm telling you that the single most powerful shift you can make in your mental operating system is moving from things happen to me to I happen to things. That shift changes everything. It changes how you spend your mornings. It changes how you respond to failure. It changes the questions you ask and the actions you take. And over time, it changes your entire life. Chapter 2. The Invisible Prison. You built yourself. I want to tell you something that might sting a little, but I'm telling you because I care about where you end up, not about making you feel comfortable right now. Ready? Most people who are stuck aren't stuck because of bad luck or lack of opportunity. They're stuck because they've built an invisible prison around themselves, brick by brick, decision by decision. And they don't even realize they're the architect. This prison doesn't have walls you can see. It's made of habits, beliefs, social expectations, and comfortable routines that feel safe but are slowly suffocating your potential. It feels like home. It feels normal. And that's exactly what makes it so dangerous. You can't escape a prison you don't know you're in. The first wall of this prison is what I call herd navigation. It's this deeply human tendency to look at what everyone around you is doing and assume that must be the right path. We've been doing this since we lived in caves. Following the group meant survival. But in the modern world, following the group usually means mediocrity. Think about it mathematically for a second. If 99% of people are getting average results, and you're doing exactly what 99% of people are doing, what result should you logically expect? Average. The math is merciless. The people who break through don't follow the herd. They study the herd, understand why it moves the way it does, and then deliberately choose a different direction. When everyone around them is chasing the same job openings, they're building skills that don't even have job titles yet. When everyone is consuming the same content, they're creating content. When everyone is waiting for permission, they're giving themselves permission. This doesn't mean being contrarian for the sake of it. Being different isn't the goal. Being deliberate is. The question isn't, what is everyone doing? The question is, what actually works, regardless of what everyone is doing? The second wall of this invisible prison is the addiction to right now. And I say addiction deliberately because that's exactly what it is. Your brain has a chemical reward system that floods you with dopamine when you get something pleasurable immediately. A notification on your phone, a sugary snack, another episode of that show, a quick scroll through social media. Each one feels harmless in isolation, but stacked up over weeks, months, years, they're stealing your future. Every time you choose the easy thing over the important thing, you're making a withdrawal from your future self's bank account. You're borrowing tomorrow's success to pay for today's comfort. And the interest rate on that loan is brutal. The person who watches 4 hours of TV tonight and the person who spends those 4 hours building a skill, they look identical today. But fast forward 5 years, and they're living in completely different realities. The gap didn't happen overnight. It happened in thousands of tiny moments where one person chose comfort and the other chose growth. The people who break out of this prison have learned something counterintuitive. They've learned to find pleasure in the hard things, not because they're masochists, but because they've connected the hard things to a future they genuinely care about. When you deeply want where you're going, the work to get there stops feeling like sacrifice and starts feeling like investment. The third wall is the story you tell yourself about yourself. I'm not a morning person. I'm bad with money. I don't have the discipline. People like me don't get opportunities like that. These stories feel like facts, but they're not. They're scripts you've been rehearsing so long that they've become your identity. And your identity is the most powerful force in your psychology. You will always act consistently with who you believe you are. If you believe you're someone who can't stick with things, you'll find a way to quit everything you start. Not because you lack ability, but because quitting is consistent with your identity. If you believe you're not good enough, you'll unconsciously sabotage opportunities that might prove otherwise, because success would contradict who you think you are. Breaking this wall requires something I call identity editing. You have to consciously rewrite the story, not with empty affirmations, standing in front of a mirror saying, "I am powerful," while your life falls apart is not a strategy. Identity editing means taking small actions that create evidence for a new story. You tell yourself, "I am someone who shows up," and then you show up. Even when it's hard, even when it's small, you show up, and each time you do, you add a new line to a new story. Over time, the new story gets louder than the old one. The fourth wall, and this one is sneaky, is social gravity. The people around you create a gravitational pull toward their level of thinking, ambition, and behavior. If everyone in your circle is comfortable with average, their comfort becomes contagious. Not because they're bad people. They might be wonderful, loving people. But their expectations become your ceiling without either of you realizing it. Breaking free from social gravity doesn't necessarily mean cutting people out of your life. It means being intentional about adding people in. People who think bigger, aim higher, and hold themselves to standards that stretch you. People who make you feel slightly uncomfortable because their ambition exposes your comfort zone. You don't need to abandon your old friends. You need to expand your circle to include people who pull you forward instead of holding you in place. The fifth wall is what I call the readiness illusion, the belief that you need to be fully prepared before you can begin. I'll start the business when I have enough savings. I'll write the book when I have more free time. I'll make the change when the timing is right. Here's the secret that every person who's ever built something meaningful knows. The timing is never right. You are never ready. Readiness is not something you wait for. It's something you create by starting before you feel ready and figuring it out along the way. Every wall of this invisible prison has the same key: awareness plus action. Once you see the wall, you can decide to walk through it. Not all at once. That's overwhelming. One wall at a time. One brick at a time. One decision at a time. The prison didn't get built in a day, and it won't come down in a day. But it will come down if you keep showing up with a hammer. Chapter 3. Installing New Mental Software. Your brain is essentially running software, mental models that filter what you notice, how you interpret events, and which decisions feel natural. Most people are running the default software that got installed during childhood, and they've never questioned whether it's any good. The people who consistently outperform everyone else, they've deliberately uninstalled the default programs and replaced them with upgraded mental models that give them an unfair advantage in almost every situation. Let me walk you through the most powerful upgrades, and I want you to think about which ones you're currently missing. The first upgrade is what I call root cause vision. Most people see problems the way you see weeds in a garden. They pop up, you pull them, they pop up again. You spend your whole life pulling weeds and wondering why your garden never gets any better. Root cause thinkers don't pull weeds. They examine the soil. They ask, what's creating conditions where weeds thrive? And then they change those conditions. Suddenly, the weeds stop growing on their own. Apply this to your life. If you're always running out of money, the problem isn't the unexpected expense that hit you last month. The problem is that you don't have a system that accounts for unexpected expenses. If you're always exhausted, the problem isn't this particular busy week. The problem is that your entire schedule is designed without margins for recovery. Root cause thinkers solve problems once. Surface level thinkers solve the same problems over and over forever. The second upgrade is reverse engineering. Instead of only imagining what success looks like and trying to move toward it, try imagining what failure looks like and make sure you're moving away from it. Sit down and seriously ask yourself, if I wanted to guarantee that I'd be broke, unhealthy, and unfulfilled in 10 years, what would I do? The answers come embarrassingly fast. Stop learning, avoid hard conversations, spend more than I earn, blame others, prioritize comfort over growth, surround myself with people who enable my worst habits. Now look at your current life honestly. How many of those failure-guaranteed behaviors are you already doing? This isn't about scaring yourself. It's about clarity. Sometimes it's easier to see the right path when you first identify all the wrong ones. The third upgrade is thinking in probabilities instead of certainties. Most people want guarantees. Will this business idea work? Will this relationship last? Will this investment pay off? They want a yes or a no, and when they can't get one, they freeze, they wait, they do nothing. But nothing in life comes with a guarantee. Everything is a probability. The people who get ahead have made peace with this. They don't ask, will this work? They ask, what are the odds this works, and what happens if it doesn't? If the potential upside is large, the downside is manageable, and the probability is reasonable. They move. They don't need certainty. They need favorable odds and the ability to recover if things don't go as planned. This is why some people seem to get lucky so often. They're not luckier than you. They're just taking more intelligent bets. They're swinging at more pitches with favorable odds while everyone else is standing at the plate waiting for the perfect pitch that never comes. The fourth upgrade is what I call leverage thinking. Most people have a linear relationship with effort and results. Work twice as hard, get twice the results. But the people who get truly extraordinary outcomes think in terms of leverage, how to get exponential results from the same effort. Leverage shows up everywhere once you start looking for it. Writing a book is leverage. You write it once, and it delivers your ideas to thousands of people without your direct involvement. Building a system is leverage. You design it once, and it works for you repeatedly. Developing a reputation is leverage. It opens doors without you having to knock. Teaching someone else your skills is leverage. Now, two people can do what only you could do before. The most powerful question you can ask yourself each week is, what am I doing right now that will still be producing results for me 6 months from now? If the answer is nothing, you're trading time for results instead of investing time for leverage. And trading always has a ceiling. Investing doesn't. The fifth upgrade is compounding awareness. We all know compound interest works with money, but most people don't realize that compounding works with everything: skills, relationships, knowledge, reputation, habits. Getting 1% better at something each day doesn't sound impressive, but compounded over a year, that's not a 365% improvement. It's a 3,778% improvement. That's the math of compounding, and it's almost impossible to intuit. This is why consistency matters more than intensity. The person who reads 10 pages every day for a year will be radically more knowledgeable than the person who binge reads for a week and then stops. The person who exercises moderately 5 days a week will be healthier than the person who crushes it for January and quits in February. Compounding rewards the boring, consistent, unglamorous daily action that nobody posts about on social media. The sixth upgrade is optionality building. Instead of trying to predict exactly what will happen and betting everything on one outcome, create as many good options for yourself as possible. Learn skills that transfer across industries. Build relationships in diverse circles. Save money so you can say yes to unexpected opportunities. Keep your fixed costs low so you can take risks without catastrophic consequences. The person with options is never desperate, and desperation is the enemy of good decisions. When you have options, you can afford to wait for the right opportunity instead of jumping at the first one. You can afford to walk away from bad deals, toxic environments, and unfulfilling paths because you have alternatives. Options are freedom. Build them intentionally. These mental models aren't just academic concepts. They're practical tools that change how you navigate every single day. Start by picking one, whichever one resonated most, and practice applying it to a real situation in your life this week. Then add the next one, then the next. Over time, you'll find yourself seeing patterns, possibilities, and solutions that are completely invisible to people running the default mental software. Chapter 4. Building Confidence That Nothing Can Shake. Let me tell you something that took me way too long to figure out. Confidence is not a personality trait. It's not something you're born with, like green eyes or curly hair. It's not some mystical energy that the universe hands out to a lucky few while the rest of us stumble around hoping we'll feel ready someday. Confidence is a skill, and like every skill, it's built through repetition, not revelation. But here's where most people get it completely backwards. They wait to feel confident before they take action. They sit on the sidelines thinking, once I feel ready, I'll start. Once I believe in myself, I'll go for it. Once this doubt goes away, I'll make the move. And so they wait and wait and wait. And that confidence they're hoping for, it never arrives, because that's not how confidence works. Confidence doesn't come before action. It comes after it. You don't feel brave and then jump. You jump, survive the landing, and then realize, oh, I'm braver than I thought. Every single person you admire for their confidence was once terrified. They just decided that being scared wasn't a good enough reason to stay still. Think about the first time you drove a car. Your hands were sweating on the steering wheel. Your heart was pounding. Every intersection felt like a life or death situation. Now, you drive while sipping coffee and having a conversation. What changed? Not some magical infusion of driving confidence. You just did it enough times that your nervous system recalibrated. You collected enough evidence that you could handle it, and eventually your body believed what your actions had been proven all along. This is what I call evidence-based confidence. You build it the same way a lawyer builds a case, by collecting proof. Every time you do something hard and survive it, you're adding a piece of evidence to your internal case file. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, even a small one, you're depositing trust into an account that only you can access. And over time, that account grows so large that no external circumstance can bankrupt it. But here's the trap that catches most people. They try to build confidence by thinking positively. They stand in front of the mirror reciting affirmations. I am enough. I am powerful. I am unstoppable. And look, I'm not going to trash affirmations entirely. There's something to be said for directing your thoughts. But if your affirmation says, I am unstoppable, and your last 3 weeks say, I couldn't even get out of bed on time, your brain knows the difference. And it doesn't believe liars, not even when the liar is you. Real confidence isn't built by telling yourself you're great. It's built by showing yourself you're capable. And the way you show yourself is through what I call the ladder method. You don't start by climbing Everest. You start by climbing the step ladder in your garage, then a small hill, then a bigger hill, then a mountain. Each rung on the ladder gives your nervous system a new data point. I attempted something hard. I handled it. I can handle the next thing too. The beautiful thing about this approach is that it turns fear from an enemy into a compass. When something scares you, instead of interpreting that fear as a stop sign, interpret it as a signpost, pointing toward your next growth opportunity. The fear isn't saying, don't go there. It's saying, you haven't been there yet. There's a massive difference. Now, let me draw an important line here between confidence and arrogance, because people confuse these two constantly. Confidence says, I can figure this out. Arrogance says, I already know everything. Confidence is quiet. It doesn't need to announce itself at every dinner table. It doesn't need to prove itself in every conversation. It just shows up, does the work, and lets the results speak. Arrogance is loud because it's actually insecurity wearing an expensive suit. Arrogant people perform confidence. Confident people simply are confident. And they're usually the ones asking the most questions, admitting mistakes fastest, and learning from everyone around them. There's another layer to unshakable confidence that most people miss entirely, and it's what I call process confidence versus outcome confidence. Most people attach their confidence to results. They feel confident when they're winning, and fall apart when they're losing. Their self-belief is a balloon that inflates with success and deflates with failure. This is a terrible way to live because outcomes are largely outside your control. Process confidence is different. It's the deep knowing that says, I may not control the outcome, but I control whether I show up and do the work. And I know I'll show up. When your confidence is rooted in your process, in your habits, your effort, your commitment, then no failure can take it away from you. You lost the deal? Fine. You still showed up prepared and gave your best pitch. The process held. You didn't get the job? Fine. You still put together a strong application and performed well in the interview. The process held. This type of confidence makes you almost impossible to break because it's tethered to the one thing nobody can take from you, your effort. Let me share one more concept that fundamentally changed how I think about confidence, and that's what I call competence stacking. Instead of trying to become the absolute best in the world at one thing, which is incredibly hard and statistically unlikely, become very good at 2 or 3 things that overlap in interesting ways. Maybe you're good at writing and you understand psychology and you know how to use technology. None of those skills alone makes you exceptional. But the overlap between them, that creates something rare and valuable, a combination that very few people possess. And rarity creates confidence because you realize that what you bring to the table is genuinely hard to replicate. This also gives you resilience. If your confidence is built on one skill and that skill becomes obsolete, your confidence collapses. But if your confidence is built on a stack of complementary skills, losing one doesn't destroy the foundation. You adapt, you add a new skill to the stack, and you keep building. Here's what I want you to take from this chapter more than anything. Stop waiting to feel confident. Start collecting evidence that you're capable. The feeling will follow the action, not the other way around. Every hard thing you do today is a deposit into the confidence account you'll draw from tomorrow. And over time, that account becomes so full that doubt becomes a whisper you can barely hear over the roar of everything you've already proven you can handle. Chapter 5, The Engine Room, Turning Plans into Reality. All right, let's talk about the thing that separates the dreamers from the doers. Because here's a truth that might be uncomfortable but needs to be said. The world is full of brilliant people with incredible plans who never execute on any of them. Graveyards are filled with unwritten novels, unlaunched businesses, and unfulfilled potential. Not because those people lacked vision, but because they lacked an engine. Vision without execution is just daydreaming with extra steps. And I say this with love because I've been that person. I've had notebooks full of plans, whiteboards covered in strategies, and absolutely nothing to show for it. Because I was addicted to planning and allergic to doing. If you've ever spent 3 hours organizing your to-do list instead of actually doing something on it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So let's get honest about why execution is so hard, and more importantly, how to make it almost automatic. The first thing you need to accept, really accept, not just nod at, is that motivation is a terrible fuel source. Motivation is like sugar. It gives you a burst of energy, makes you feel amazing for about 20 minutes, and then crashes hard. You've experienced this. You watch an inspiring video at midnight. You feel like you could conquer the world. You make grand plans, and by 10 a.m. the next day, you're back on the couch wondering where all that fire went. Motivation is an emotion, and emotions are visitors. They come, they stay for a bit, and they leave. If your execution plan depends on a visitor showing up every day, you don't have a plan. You have a wish. The people who execute relentlessly have replaced motivation with machinery. They've built systems, routines, and structures that make execution automatic, like a conveyor belt in a factory that keeps moving whether any individual worker feels like showing up or not. They don't ask themselves, do I feel like doing this today? They've designed their day, so the question never comes up. Here's what this looks like practically. Instead of, I should work out more, they have a specific time, place, and routine locked in. 6 a.m., home gym, 30-minute circuit, no decision required. Instead of, I need to work on my side project, they have a recurring block on their calendar that's treated like a doctor's appointment. Non-negotiable, no rescheduling, no excuses. The power isn't in the routine itself. The power is in removing the decision. Every decision you have to make about whether to do something is an opportunity for your brain to talk you out of it. Eliminate the decision. Eliminate the negotiation. The second engine principle is what I call the floor, not the ceiling. Most people set ambitious targets and then feel like failures when they don't hit them. I'll write 2,000 words today. Then life happens. They write nothing, and they feel defeated. The next day, the guilt makes it even harder to start, and before you know it, the project is abandoned. Instead of setting a ceiling you're trying to reach, set a floor you refuse to drop below. Your writing floor might be 100 words. Your exercise floor might be 5 minutes. Your learning floor might be 1 page. These floors are so low they feel almost silly. And that's exactly the point. On your best days, you'll blow past the floor and write 2,000 words or exercise for an hour. But on your worst days, sick, exhausted, overwhelmed, heartbroken, you can still hit the floor. And hitting the floor keeps the chain unbroken. This matters more than you think, because execution is really about identity. Every day you execute, even minimally, you're reinforcing the identity of someone who does the work. Every day you skip, you're reinforcing the identity of someone who makes excuses. The floor protects your identity on bad days, and your identity is what drives everything. The third engine principle is making your intentions surgical. Don't say, I'll work on my goals this week. That's a cloud, not a plan. Say, on Tuesday and Thursday from 7 to 9 p.m., I'll work on the marketing plan for my project at my desk with my phone in another room. When you specify the when, where, what, and how of your execution, something remarkable happens in your brain. You've basically preloaded the decision. When Tuesday at 7 p.m. arrives, your brain doesn't debate whether to work. It already knows the script. Researchers have found that this level of specificity can double or triple your follow-through rate. Not because you suddenly have more willpower, but because you've eliminated the ambiguity that lets procrastination sneak in. Procrastination thrives in vagueness. Precision starves it. The fourth engine principle is what I call obstacle rehearsal. Imagine you're driving to an important meeting and you've only planned one route. Traffic jam hits and you're stuck panicking, watching the clock. Now imagine you planned 3 routes before you left. Traffic jam hits, and you calmly take the alternate road. Same obstacle, completely different experience, because you anticipated it. Do this with your execution. Before you start any important project or routine, sit down and list every predictable obstacle. What if I'm too tired? Plan. I'll do the minimum viable version. What if I get interrupted? Plan. I'll resume within 5 minutes of the interruption ending. What if I lose motivation? Plan. I'll remind myself why I started and commit to just 10 minutes. When you've pre-solved your obstacles, they lose their power to derail you. You stop being surprised by resistance and start being prepared for it. The 5th engine principle is tracking and celebrating. What you measure, you manage. But more importantly, what you celebrate, you repeat. Most people are terrible at acknowledging their own progress. They fixate on how far they have to go and ignore how far they've come. This is psychologically devastating because your brain needs evidence of progress to maintain momentum. Start tracking your execution, not just outcomes. Track the actions themselves. Did you show up today? Check. Did you hit your floor? Check. Did you follow your plan? Check. Then celebrate those checks. Not with champagne and confetti. A simple moment of internal acknowledgement is enough. I said I would, and I did. That tiny celebration creates a dopamine loop that makes you want to do it again tomorrow. The 6th engine principle is energy alignment. Not all hours are created equal, and pretending they are is sabotaging your execution. You have peak hours, times when your focus is sharpest, your creativity is highest, and your decision-making is clearest. For most people, this is somewhere in the first few hours after waking up. And you have valley hours, times when you're running on fumes and can barely remember your own name. Most people waste their peak hours on email, social media, and administrative tasks, then try to do their most important work during their valley hours. It's like trying to run a race in quicksand. Flip it. Protect your peak hours like they're sacred, because they are. Use them exclusively for your highest leverage work. Push everything else to the valleys. This single change can feel like you've added 2 extra hours to your day simply by matching the right work to the right energy. Here's the bottom line on execution. You don't need more motivation. You don't need more inspiration. You don't need another planning session. You need an engine, a system that converts your intentions into actions regardless of how you feel, what obstacles arise, or how chaotic life gets. Build the engine, maintain the engine, trust the engine. The results will come. Chapter 6. The Architecture of Your Daily Life. Here's something that hit me like a freight train the first time I truly understood it. Your life right now, exactly as it is the output of systems you've been running, mostly unconsciously, for years. Your bank account, your health, your relationships, your energy levels, none of these are accidents. They're all the predictable results of patterns you've repeated so many times they become invisible. This is both the most humbling and the most empowering realization you can have. Humbling because it means you can't blame your current situation on anything external. Your patterns created it. Empowering because it means you can change your situation by changing your patterns. You don't need a new life. You need new systems. Let's talk about how habits actually form, because most people get this spectacularly wrong. They think habits are about discipline. I just need to try harder. I just need more willpower. This is like saying, I just need to be taller. Willpower is a finite resource. It depletes throughout the day like a battery. If your habit strategy depends on willpower, you're building on sand. Your brain forms habits through a loop so simple it's almost insulting. Trigger, behavior, reward. Your phone buzzes. That's the trigger. You check it. That's the behavior. You see a notification that gives you a little hit of novelty. That's the reward. Loop complete. Repeat a few hundred times and congratulations. You now have a habit of checking your phone every 3 minutes without even realizing it. The beautiful thing about this loop is that it works in both directions. You can use the exact same mechanism to build habits that serve you instead of sabotage you. The key is to be intentional about each element. Let's start with triggers. Instead of letting random triggers drive random behaviors, attach your desired habits to triggers that already exist in your daily life. You already brush your teeth every morning. That's a reliable trigger. So, after I brush my teeth, I'll do 10 push-ups, uses an existing habit to anchor a new one. You already pour your first cup of coffee. After I pour my coffee, I'll write in my journal for 5 minutes. You're not creating something from nothing. You're attaching new behavior to existing architecture. Next, behavior. And this is where most people destroy their own progress. They start too big. I'm going to meditate for 30 minutes every morning. I'm going to write 1,000 words every day. I'm going to cook healthy meals from scratch for every single dinner. These sound great in the planning phase, but collapse almost immediately in the execution phase because they require too much activation energy. Instead, make the behavior embarrassingly small, so small that it feels ridiculous. Meditate for 60 seconds. Write 1 sentence. Prepare 1 healthy snack. Your brain is not resisting the habit itself. It's resisting the perceived effort of the habit. Make the effort so tiny that resistance has nothing to grab onto. You can always do more once you've started. The starting is the hard part. Make it effortless, then the reward. Your brain needs a reason to repeat the behavior. For some habits, the reward is built in. Exercise eventually feels good. Journaling eventually feels clarifying. But in the beginning, before those natural rewards kick in, you might need to add something. A check mark on a calendar, a moment of genuine self-acknowledgement, a small treat that doesn't undermine the habit itself. The reward doesn't need to be big. It just needs to be immediate enough that your brain connects it to the behavior. Now, here's a piece of habit wisdom that changed my entire approach. Focus on one habit at a time. I know, you want to overhaul your entire life by next month. You want to wake up at 5, meditate, exercise, journal, read, eat clean, study, and build your side project, all starting Monday. I understand that energy. I felt it. But that energy is a trap because it leads to overwhelm. Overwhelm leads to inconsistency, and inconsistency leads to quitting. Pick one habit, just one. The one that would create the most positive ripple effect across your life. Maybe it's exercise, because when you exercise, you naturally eat better, sleep better, and think more clearly. Maybe it's waking up early, because that extra morning time create space for everything else. Whatever it is, give it your full attention for at least 30 days. Make it automatic. Make it effortless. And then, only then, add the next one. This sequential approach feels painfully slow. But I promise you, the person who builds one solid habit per month has 12 life-changing habits by the end of the year. The person who tries to build 12 habits in January has 0 by February. Let me talk about something equally important: your environment. Your surroundings are silently shaping your behavior every single day, and most people never realize it. You don't eat the chocolate because you lack discipline. You eat the chocolate because it's sitting on the counter staring at you. You don't scroll your phone for 2 hours because you're weak. You scroll because the phone is within arm's reach, and the apps are designed by teams of engineers whose entire job is to make you scroll. The people who build great habits don't rely on superhuman willpower. They redesign their environment so the right choice becomes the easy choice. Want to read more? Put a book on your pillow so you see it before bed. Want to eat healthier? Prep healthy snacks and put them at eye level in the fridge. Want to exercise in the morning? Sleep in your workout clothes if you have to. Reduce the friction for good behaviors. Increase the friction for bad behaviors. It's that simple, and it's shockingly effective. One more thing about habits that doesn't get talked about enough: the recovery protocol. You're going to break the chain. It's not a matter of if, it's when. You'll miss a day. You'll fall off the wagon. You'll have a terrible week where everything collapses. This is normal. This is human. This is not failure. The difference between people who build lasting habits and people who don't isn't that the first group never stumbles. It's that they get back on track faster. They follow what I call the next one rule. Missed a workout? The next one happens as scheduled. Ate terribly yesterday? The next meal is a good one. Skipped your morning routine? Tomorrow morning, you're back. No guilt spiral, no dramatic, I'll restart on Monday. Just next one. Because here's the truth about habits that nobody tells you. The habit itself isn't the point. The person you become through the habit, that's the point. Every time you show up and do the small, boring thing you committed to, you're not just building a habit. You're building a person who keeps promises to themselves, a person who does what they said they'd do, a person whose self-trust is so deep that doubt can't reach it. That person can do anything, and that person is built one tiny, boring, unglamorous habit at a time. Chapter 7. Learning. Like your future depends on it, because it does. Let me paint a picture for you. Imagine two people starting the same job on the same day, at the same company, with the same title and the same salary. 5 years later, one of them is running a department, earning 3 times what they started with, and fielding offers from competitors. The other is still in the same role, doing the same tasks, earning roughly the same paycheck with minor adjustments for inflation. What happened? It wasn't politics. It wasn't favoritism. It wasn't luck. The first person learned faster. That's it. They figured out how to absorb new skills, apply them immediately, and stack them on top of each other until they became so valuable that opportunities started chasing them instead of the other way around. In a world that's changing faster than any generation before us has ever experienced, your ability to learn quickly isn't a nice bonus. It's the whole game. The skills that made someone successful 10 years ago might be completely irrelevant today. The job titles that exist 5 years from now might not even have names yet. The only thing that stays valuable across every era, every industry, and every shift in the landscape is the ability to pick up new things fast and use them well. But here's the problem. Most people are still learning the way they were taught in school, and school taught us to learn in the worst possible way. Sit still. Listen passively. Memorize information you'll never use. Take a test. Forget everything 2 weeks later. Repeat for 16 years. Then enter the real world and wonder why you can't seem to learn anything that sticks. The people who learn fastest have completely abandoned this model. They've replaced it with what I call active learning, and the difference is night and day. The first principle of active learning is something I call learn by doing, not by preparing to do. Most people approach a new skill the way a nervous swimmer approaches a pool. They read about swimming. They watch YouTube videos about swimming. They buy the perfect goggles and the best swimsuit. They stand at the edge of the pool for weeks, studying water dynamics and stroke techniques, and they never get wet. Meanwhile, the person who jumped in on day one, sloppy, scared, swallowing water, is already doing laps. Not perfect laps, messy, ugly, graceless laps, but actual laps. And every single one of those messy laps is teaching them more than 100 hours of poolside preparation ever could. This is the core of accelerated learning. Application before mastery. You don't need to understand everything before you start. You need to understand just enough to begin, and then let the doing teach you what the studying couldn't. When you apply knowledge to real situations, your brain treats it differently. It files it under important, keep this, instead of interesting. Maybe store this somewhere. Context makes knowledge sticky. Without context, knowledge is just trivia. So whatever you want to learn right now, a language, an instrument, a software tool, a business skill, stop preparing and start doing. Accept that your first attempts will be terrible. That's not a bug in the process. That's the process. The second principle is learning from results instead of just from information. Most people learn horizontally. They consume more and more information about a subject, reading book after book, watching course after course, collecting knowledge like stamps in an album. But they never stop to examine what actually works in the real world. The fastest learners study outcomes. They find people who've achieved what they want to achieve and reverse engineer the path. They don't just ask, "What do I need to know?" They ask, "What did this person actually do and what happened because of it?" This outcome-based learning is ruthlessly practical. It filters out the theoretical noise and zeroes in on the actions that create real results. Try this. Instead of reading 5 books about starting a business, find 5 people who've actually started businesses similar to what you want to build. Study their first year. What did they do in month 1? What mistakes did they make in month 3? What decision in month 6 changed everything? That real-world data will teach you more than any textbook because it comes with built-in context, consequences, and lessons that theory can't replicate. The third principle is building your learning engine, investing time in learning how to learn. This sounds circular, but it's actually the highest leverage investment you can make. Most people spend decades learning specific things without ever improving their ability to learn. It's like driving the same car for 30 years without ever changing the oil or upgrading the engine. What does learning how to learn look like practically? It means understanding how your memory works. That spaced repetition beats cramming. That teaching others cements knowledge more than reviewing it yourself. That connecting new information to things you already know creates stronger neural pathways than memorizing in isolation. It means understanding your personal learning style, not the oversimplified visual versus auditory categories, but genuinely noticing when you absorb information best. Do you learn better in the morning or at night, in silence or with background noise, through reading, listening, watching, or doing, through structured courses or unstructured exploration? Everyone's different, and the person who understands their own learning patterns has a permanent advantage over someone who doesn't. It means developing a system for capturing and organizing what you learn. Your brain is terrible at storage. It's designed to generate ideas, not archive them. If you don't have a system for writing down insights, organizing notes, and reviewing key concepts, you're losing most of what you learn within days. A simple notebook, a digital notes app, even voice memos. The tool doesn't matter. The habit of capturing matters enormously. The fourth principle is what I call deliberate discomfort in practice. Most people practice by repeating what they're already good at. A guitar player plays the same songs they've already mastered. A writer writes in the same style they're already comfortable with. A speaker gives the same type of presentation they've given a dozen times. This feels productive, but produces almost zero growth. Real improvement happens when you target your weaknesses specifically and practice at the outer edge of your ability, where it's hard enough to challenge you, but not so hard that you shut down. This is the zone where growth lives, and it's always uncomfortable. The guitar player who spends 30 minutes on a passage they keep messing up will improve more than the one who plays their favorite song perfectly 10 times. The discomfort is the signal that learning is happening. The fifth principle is learning spirals. This is the idea that learning and doing should feed each other in a continuous loop. You learn something, you apply it. The application reveals gaps in your understanding. You go back and learn what you're missing. You apply again with deeper knowledge, and each cycle makes you better than the last. Most people treat learning and doing as separate phases. First I'll learn, then I'll do. The spiral approach merges them into one continuous motion. You're always learning and always doing, and each one accelerates the other. Someone building a website doesn't wait until they've mastered web development. They learn enough to build a basic page, build it, notice what's ugly or broken, learn how to fix those specific things, rebuild, and repeat. 6 months of spiraling will produce a better developer than 2 years of courses followed by 1 month of building. The sixth principle is skill stacking, and I touched on this in the confidence chapter, but it's worth expanding here because it's so powerful. The traditional path says, pick one thing and get extraordinarily good at it. And for some people in some fields, that works. But for most of us, the more realistic and often more valuable approach is to become genuinely good at 3 or 4 things that complement each other. The magic happens at the intersections. Someone who understands data analysis and storytelling can turn numbers into narratives that move entire organizations. Someone who knows psychology and design can create user experiences that feel intuitive and engaging. Someone who can write clearly, understand technology, and communicate with non-technical people becomes invaluable in almost any modern company. You don't need to be world-class at any individual skill. You need to be good enough at each one that the combination creates something rare. And rare is where the value lives. Let me leave you with this thought about learning. The goal is never to learn for the sake of learning. The goal is to build capabilities that allow you to create value, solve problems, and navigate a changing world with confidence and agility. Every hour you invest in learning should pass this test. Will this make me meaningfully more capable of creating results I care about? If yes, lean in. If no, it might be entertainment disguised as education. And there's nothing wrong with entertainment, but don't confuse it with growth. Chapter 8. The invisible web that holds everything together. Nobody succeeds alone. I know that sounds like a motivational poster you'd find in a dentist's waiting room, but stay with me because this truth runs so much deeper than most people realize. Behind every person who seems to have made it, every entrepreneur who built something remarkable, every artist who created something lasting, every leader who moved people, there's a web of relationships that provided exactly what they needed at exactly the right time. An introduction here, a piece of advice there, a door opened, a risk shared, a failure cushioned. Your relationships are not a side dish in the meal of success. They're the table the whole meal sits on. And yet, most people approach relationship building with the strategic depth of a toddler at a birthday party. Grab what you can, ignore everyone you don't immediately need, and leave when the cake runs out. Let me show you a different way. The first thing you need to understand about building relationships that actually matter is that the word networking has been completely ruined. When most people hear networking, they picture awkward events with name tags, forced small talk over lukewarm appetizers, and people who hand you business cards while their eyes scan the room for someone more important. That's not networking. That's performing, and almost everyone can smell it. Real relationship building is nothing like that. Real relationship building is simply this. Be genuinely interested in other people, find ways to help them, and stay connected over time. That's the whole formula. It's not complicated. It's just rare because most people are too focused on themselves to execute it. The most powerful relationship principle I've ever encountered is what I call give first, give often, give without scorekeeping. Instead of approaching every person with the silent question, "What can you do for me?" Flip it. Ask yourself, "What can I do for this person?" Maybe you know someone they should meet. Maybe you read an article that's relevant to their work. Maybe you can offer a skill they need. Maybe you can just listen, genuinely listen, when they need to talk something through. This approach works for a reason that goes beyond altruism. Human beings are wired for reciprocity. When someone helps you without asking for anything in return, something deep in your psychology wants to return the favor, not because you feel obligated, but because you've been touched by genuine generosity. And that creates a bond that transactional relationships never achieve. But here's the key. You have to do this without keeping score. The moment you start tracking, I helped Sarah 3 times and she hasn't helped me once. You've turned generosity into a transaction, and the whole thing collapses. Give because giving makes you the kind of person others want to be connected to. The returns will come, but they'll come indirectly, unexpectedly, and often from people you never anticipated. The second principle is understanding that relationship value compounds like interest in a savings account. The coffee you have with someone today might seem insignificant, but that coffee leads to a follow-up conversation, which leads to a collaboration, which leads to an introduction to someone who becomes your business partner, who introduces you to a client who transforms your career. The initial coffee didn't pay off. It planted a seed that grew roots you couldn't see for months or years. This is why most people give up on relationship building. They expect immediate returns. I went to 3 networking events and nothing happened, so networking doesn't work. Of course nothing happened. You planted seeds 3 weeks ago, and you're angry there's no harvest yet. Relationships compound over time, and the people who understand this are patient, consistent, and always planting. The third principle is one that might surprise you. Build a diverse web, not just a comfortable one. Most people naturally gravitate toward people who look like them, think like them, work in the same industry, and share the same perspectives. This feels comfortable, but it creates what researchers call an echo chamber, a closed loop where everyone has the same information, the same connections, and the same blind spots. The most valuable position in any network is what sociologists call a bridge, someone who connects groups that wouldn't otherwise be connected. If you know people in tech and people in healthcare, you can see opportunities at the intersection that nobody in either group can see alone. If you have friends in different countries, different industries, different age groups, different backgrounds, you have access to a diversity of information and opportunity that people in homogeneous networks simply don't have. So be intentional about building bridges. Go to events outside your industry. Have conversations with people who see the world differently. Maintain connections across different circles. The most transformative opportunities in your life will probably come from someone who exists in a completely different world than your daily one. The fourth principle is about weak ties, and this is genuinely counterintuitive. Your closest friends and family, the people you talk to every day, are your strong ties. They love you, they support you, and they're deeply important. But when it comes to creating new opportunities, research consistently shows that weak ties, people you know casually, perhaps someone you met at a workshop 2 years ago, or a former colleague you occasionally interact with on social media, are often more valuable. Why? Because your strong ties exist in the same information bubble you do. They know the same people, hear about the same opportunities, and operate in the same world. Your weak ties exist in different bubbles. They have access to information, people, and opportunities that your close circle doesn't. That acquaintance from a conference 3 years ago might be the person who tells you about a job opening, a business opportunity, or a potential collaborator that nobody in your inner circle knows about. This doesn't mean weak ties are more important than strong ties. It means both serve different purposes, and most people completely neglect the weak tie part of their network. Stay loosely connected to a wide range of people. A quick message every few months, a comment on their post, a shared article. These small touches keep the connection alive and keep you accessible to opportunities that flow through diverse networks. The fifth principle is what I call relationship maintenance, and it's where most people fail catastrophically. Building new connections is exciting. Maintaining existing ones is boring. So people collect connections like trophies, display them proudly, and then let them gather dust. 6 months later, they try to reach out to someone they haven't spoken to since they needed something, and the relationship feels hollow, because it is. Create a simple system for staying in touch with people who matter. It doesn't have to be complicated. A reminder every quarter to reach out to key contacts. A habit of sending one thoughtful message per week to someone in your network. A practice of sharing useful content with people who'd appreciate it. These small, consistent actions keep your relationships warm and genuine so that when opportunities arise on either side, the connection is already there. The sixth principle is perhaps the most important of all. Be someone worth knowing. You can execute every networking strategy in the world, but if you're not bringing real value to the table, none of it matters. The best way to attract great relationships is to become the kind of person great people want to be around. Develop your skills. Be generous with your knowledge. Follow through on commitments. Be genuinely interested in others. Have integrity that doesn't bend when it's inconvenient. When you focus on becoming valuable rather than just connecting with valuable people, something almost magical happens. The right people start finding you. Opportunities start appearing. Doors start opening. Not because you're playing some clever strategy, but because value attracts value. It always has, and it always will. Chapter 9. Becoming the thermostat, not the thermometer. Here's a metaphor I want you to carry with you long after you've finished listening to this. A thermometer reads the temperature of the room. It goes up when the room gets hot, drops when the room gets cold. It has zero control over the environment. It just reacts to it. A thermostat sets the temperature. It decides what the room should feel like and adjusts conditions to match. It doesn't react to the environment. It shapes it. Most people live as thermometers. Their emotional state is entirely determined by their surroundings. Good day at work? They feel great. Traffic on the way home? They feel angry. Compliment from a friend? They feel confident. Criticism from a stranger? They feel crushed. Their inner world is a helpless mirror of their outer world, bouncing up and down based on events they can't control. The people who build extraordinary lives have learned to become thermostats. They decide how they want to feel and think, and then they adjust their internal conditions to match, regardless of what's happening around them. This doesn't mean they don't feel emotions. They feel everything. They just don't let those emotions steer the ship. This distinction is one of the most important things you'll ever understand. So let me break it down carefully. The first thing to grasp is that your emotions are not caused by events. They're caused by your interpretation of events. The same event, let's say you get passed over for a promotion, can create completely different emotions in different people. One person interprets it as, "I'm not good enough," and spirals into self-doubt. Another interprets it as, "The decision makers don't see my value yet, so I need to make it more visible," and channels the experience into a strategy. A third interprets it as, "This company doesn't appreciate what I bring, and that's useful information about whether I should stay," and starts exploring options. Same event. Three completely different emotional responses. The difference isn't in the event, it's in the story each person tells themselves about the event. And here's the powerful part. You get to choose your story. Not instantly, not effortlessly, and not without practice. But with awareness and intention, you can learn to catch the story your mind is telling and ask, is this the only story? Is there a more useful interpretation? This isn't about lying to yourself or pretending bad things are good. It's about recognizing that in any situation, there are multiple true interpretations, and you get to choose which one you focus on. The situation is bad, that's true, but you can handle it, that's also true. Something went wrong, true, but you can learn from it, also true. Choosing the more empowering interpretation isn't denial, it's strategic focus. The second principle of emotional mastery is developing what I call emotional precision. Most people operate with an emotional vocabulary of about 5 words. Happy, sad, angry, stressed, fine. How are you? Fine. How was your day? Stressful? This vagueness isn't just linguistically lazy, it's strategically disabling. Because if you can't precisely identify what you're feeling, you can't precisely address it. There's a massive difference between frustration and disappointment, even though both feel bad. Frustration means you're blocked from something you want and need to find a new approach. Disappointment means your expectations didn't match reality, and you need to either adjust your expectations or your actions. The remedy for frustration is problem solving. The remedy for disappointment is recalibration. Use the wrong remedy, and you make things worse. Start building your emotional vocabulary. When you feel bad, push deeper. Is it anxiety, loneliness, boredom, grief, jealousy, overwhelm? Each of these has a different message and a different solution. The more precisely you can name what you're feeling, the more effectively you can respond to it. The third principle is learning to separate the wave from the ocean. Emotions come in waves. They rise, they peak, they fall. Every emotion, no matter how intense, is temporary. But when you're in the middle of a wave, it feels permanent. When you're furious, it feels like you'll be furious forever. When you're heartbroken, it feels like the pain will never end. When you're anxious, it feels like the anxiety is who you are. It's not. You are the ocean. The wave is just passing through. This distinction matters enormously because most of the worst decisions people make happen during emotional waves. They send the angry text during a wave. They quit the project during the wave. They say the thing they can't take back during the wave. And then the wave passes, and they're left standing in the wreckage of a decision they made when they were temporarily insane. The people who master their emotions have learned to create a gap between the wave and their response. They feel the anger rise and they pause. They feel the panic swell and they breathe. They feel the urge to react and they wait. Not forever, just long enough for the wave to pass through and leave them standing on solid ground again. From that solid ground, they can choose a response instead of being hijacked by a reaction. How do you build this gap? Practice. Meditation helps, not because it makes you calm, but because it trains your brain to observe thoughts and feelings without automatically acting on them. Physical movement helps. Sometimes the fastest way to change your emotional state is to change your physical state. Walk, stretch, do push-ups, splash cold water on your face. Your body and brain are deeply connected, and shifting one shifts the other. The fourth principle is what I call emotional recycling. Most people see difficult emotions as waste, something to be disposed of as quickly as possible. Fear, anger, frustration, sadness. They treat these like garbage to be thrown out. But the people who achieve extraordinary things have learned to recycle these emotions into fuel. Fear becomes preparation. I'm scared of this presentation, so I'm going to be the most prepared person in the room. Anger becomes determination. I'm angry about being underestimated, so I'm going to work until the results speak for themselves. Frustration becomes innovation. This approach isn't working, so I'm forced to find a completely different way. Even sadness has value. It connects you to your humanity, deepens your empathy, and often redirects you toward things that truly matter. The emotion itself isn't good or bad. What you do with it determines its value. And the people who learn to extract value from difficult emotions have an enormous advantage over those who are simply trying to avoid feeling bad. The fifth principle is recovery speed. You're going to get knocked down emotionally. That's guaranteed. Life will hit you with losses, betrayals, failures, disappointments, and situations that feel genuinely unfair. You can't prevent the knockdowns. What you can control is how fast you get back up. Most people extend their suffering unnecessarily by replaying the situation, dwelling on what went wrong, and marinating in the emotion long after its useful information has been extracted. The replay doesn't help. The dwelling doesn't help. At some point, and that point comes much sooner than most people think, continued emotional processing becomes emotional indulgence. Develop a recovery protocol. Something you do when you've been knocked down that helps you process the emotion, extract the lesson, and return to forward motion. For some people, it's journaling, getting the thoughts out of their head and onto paper so they can examine them clearly. For some, it's physical activity, literally running or lifting the emotion out of their system. For some, it's conversation, talking it through with someone they trust. For some, it's simply time and space, giving themselves permission to feel bad for a defined period and then deliberately choosing to move forward. The key is having a protocol and trusting it. When the knockdown comes, you don't panic. You don't spiral. You say, I know what to do when this happens, and you do it. Each recovery builds your capacity for the next one, and over time, the things that used to flatten you for weeks start flattening you for days, then hours, then minutes. The sixth principle, and this one ties everything together, is building what I call emotional endurance. Just like physical endurance allows you to perform physically over long periods, emotional endurance allows you to maintain your mental state over long periods of stress, uncertainty, and challenge. You build emotional endurance the same way you build physical endurance, through progressive exposure. You don't run a marathon on your first day of training. You start with a mile, then 2, then 5, then 10. Each increase expands your capacity. Similarly, you build emotional endurance by progressively exposing yourself to situations that are emotionally challenging. Difficult conversations, rejection, public scrutiny, high-stakes decisions, and practicing your response each time. Over time, your emotional capacity expands. Situations that would have overwhelmed you a year ago become manageable. Stresses that would have broken you become fuel. You develop what athletes call a second wind, the ability to find reserves of calm, focus, and determination when everyone else has hit their limit. This is the ultimate competitive advantage, because when the pressure is on, and the pressure is always on eventually, the person who can maintain clarity, composure, and forward motion when everyone else is falling apart is the person who wins. Not because they're smarter or more talented, but because they're still standing, still thinking, and still moving when the thermometers around them have shattered. Chapter 10. The Art of Choosing. Well, let me ask you something. If I told you there was one single skill that, if you mastered it, would improve your finances, your relationships, your health, your career, and your happiness all at once, would you want to learn it? Of course you would. And here it is, decision-making. Your life right now, this exact moment. The apartment you're sitting in, the job you're going to tomorrow, the balance in your bank account, the person sleeping next to you, or the empty side of the bed. All of it is the accumulated result of decisions you've made over the past 5, 10, 20 years. Not one dramatic decision, thousands of small ones. What to study, who to spend time with, when to say yes, when to say no, when to stay, when to leave, when to speak up, when to stay quiet. Each one seemed small at the time. Together, they built the life you're living. This should terrify you and excite you in equal measure. Terrify you because it means there's nobody else to blame. Excite you because it means the quality of your future is almost entirely within your control, if you learn to choose better. Most people make decisions the way a pinball bounces off bumpers, reactively, emotionally, and without any consistent framework. Something comes at them, they feel something, they react. No analysis, no system, no strategy, just vibes. And vibes are a terrible compass for building a life. The people who consistently get ahead have developed what I call decision architecture, frameworks that help them make better choices faster, with less stress and fewer regrets. Let me walk you through the most important ones. The first framework is the door test. Not every decision deserves the same amount of your time and energy. Some decisions are like revolving doors. If you walk through and don't like what's on the other side, you can turn around and walk right back. These are reversible decisions. Choosing which project, management tool to use, trying a new gym, testing a different morning routine, starting a side project. With revolving doors, speed is your friend. Try it, see what happens, adjust if needed. Other decisions are like one-way doors. Once you walk through, you can't easily come back. signing a 2-year lease, taking on significant debt, having a child, accepting a job in a different country. These deserve serious thought, research, and deliberation. Here's where most people go wrong. They treat revolving doors like one-way doors, agonizing over decisions that could easily be reversed. They spend 3 weeks researching the perfect laptop. They deliberate for months about whether to start a blog. They have 17 conversations about whether to try a new restaurant. This isn't careful decision-making. It's decision avoidance disguised as thoroughness. Meanwhile, the same people often rush through one-way doors without nearly enough thought, impulsively taking on debt, making emotional career changes, or entering relationships without understanding what they're actually signing up for. Flip it. Move fast on revolving doors. Move carefully through one-way doors. This single principle will save you thousands of hours of unnecessary deliberation and protect you from the decisions that actually matter. The second framework is expected value thinking. Most people evaluate decisions in black and white. Will this work or won't it? But almost nothing in life is binary. Everything exists on a spectrum of probability. The question isn't, will this work? The question is, what's the probability it works? And what do I gain or lose based on different outcomes? Let me give you a practical example. Say you're considering leaving your stable job to start a business. Binary thinking says, either I'll succeed and get rich or I'll fail and be broke. That framing is paralyzing because both outcomes feel extreme. Expected value thinking says there's maybe a 30% chance this business takes off in the first 2 years. There's a 50% chance it moderately succeeds and replaces my current income within 3 years. There's a 20% chance it fails entirely, in which case I'll have gained experience, connections, and skills that make me more employable than before. When you think in probabilities instead of absolutes, decisions become much less scary and much more clear. The people who get ahead don't need certainty. They need favorable odds and manageable downsides. They're comfortable placing bets where the potential upside significantly exceeds the potential downside, even if success isn't guaranteed. Because they understand something that most people don't. Inaction is also a bet. Staying in that unfulfilling job is a bet. You're betting that security today is worth more than possibility tomorrow. And sometimes that's the right bet. But make it consciously, not by default. The third framework is what I call pre-mortem thinking. You've heard of a post-mortem, an analysis you do after something goes wrong to figure out what happened. A pre-mortem is the same thing, but you do it before you start. You imagine it 6 months from now, and your decision has led to a terrible outcome. Then you ask, what went wrong? What caused this to fail? This isn't pessimism, it's strategic imagination. When you force yourself to vividly picture failure, your brain surfaces risks and blind spots that optimism hides. You start seeing things like, oh, I didn't account for the cash flow gap in months 2 through 4, or I assumed my partner would be fully committed, but I never actually confirmed that, or I planned for the best case but have no backup for the worst case. Pre-mortem thinking doesn't prevent failure, but it dramatically reduces preventable failure, the kind that happens not because of bad luck, but because of bad planning. And most failure is preventable failure. The fourth framework is optionality creation. Instead of trying to predict exactly what will happen and bet everything on one outcome, make decisions that create multiple good paths forward. Choose the career that develops transferable skills rather than ultra-specialized ones. Make investments that have limited downside but multiple potential upsides. Build relationships across diverse fields rather than concentrating all your social capital in one industry. The person with options is never desperate, and desperate people make terrible decisions. When you have alternatives, you negotiate from strength rather than weakness. You can walk away from bad deals because you have other deals. You can leave bad situations because you have somewhere else to go. Options are freedom, and the smartest decisions are often the ones that maximize your future options rather than committing you to a single path. The fifth framework is what I call the future self-test. Before making any significant decision, ask yourself, will the 70-year-old version of me be glad I made this choice? This simple question cuts through an enormous amount of noise. It strips away the short-term emotions, the fear, the excitement, the social pressure, and forces you to evaluate the decision from a perspective that values what actually matters in the long run. Most regrets in life come from one of two sources: things you did that you wish you hadn't, or things you didn't do that you wish you had. Research consistently shows that the second category is much larger. People regret inaction far more than action. They regret the chances they didn't take, the words they didn't say, and the dreams they didn't chase far more than the failures they experienced while trying. So when you're standing at a decision point, unsure whether to leap or stay put, ask yourself, 20 years from now, which choice will I wish I had made? The answer is usually pretty clear, and it's usually the braver one. The sixth framework is building a decision journal. Every time you make an important decision, write down 3 things: what you decided, why you decided it, and what you expect to happen. Then, 3 months or 6 months later, go back and review. Were you right? Were you wrong? What did you miss? What did you predict correctly? This practice does something incredibly powerful. It creates a feedback loop for your decision-making. Without a journal, you forget what you actually predicted, and your brain retroactively edits the story to make you seem smarter than you were. With a journal, you get honest data about where your thinking is strong and where it's weak. Over time, this self-awareness compounds into dramatically better judgment. The people who make the best decisions aren't the ones who are right most often. They're the ones who learn from being wrong most quickly. A decision journal accelerates that learning in ways that nothing else can. One final thought on decision-making. Speed matters more than most people think. In a world that's changing rapidly, a good decision made today is almost always better than a perfect decision made next month. The person who makes 10 decent decisions while you're agonizing over one perfect decision will outpace you every time, because each of their decisions generated real-world feedback that made their next decision better. Don't worship the altar of perfect decisions. Worship the altar of good decisions made quickly, reviewed honestly, and improved continuously. That's how the best decision makers in the world actually operate. Chapter 11. Owning your hours. Time is the strangest resource you'll ever deal with. You can't earn more of it. You can't save it in a jar for later. You can't borrow it from tomorrow or reclaim it from yesterday. It moves in one direction at one speed, and every single human being on the planet, billionaire or beggar, gets the exact same amount each day. 24 hours, 1,440 minutes. That's it. No exceptions, no upgrades, no premium plan. And yet, some people manage to build empires, write masterpieces, raise families, stay fit, learn languages, and maintain friendships within those same 24 hours that other people barely survive. How? It's not time management. That phrase is almost insulting in how it oversimplifies the problem. You can't manage time any more than you can manage the weather. Time doesn't take orders from you. What you can manage is yourself within time. And that's a completely different skill. The first and most important distinction is one that most people never make: the difference between being busy and being effective. These two things feel identical from the inside, but produce radically different outcomes. Busy feels like productivity. Your calendar is full. Your to-do list is long. You're always swamped. You collapse into bed exhausted and think, I worked so hard today. But then weeks pass, and nothing meaningful has changed. Your goals are in the same place. Your projects haven't moved. Your life looks exactly the same. That's because busy is about volume, how many things you touched. Effective is about impact, which things actually mattered. And the brutal truth is that most of the things filling your day don't matter. They feel urgent. They feel necessary. They feel like they deserve your attention. But they're not moving you toward anything meaningful. They're just noise disguised as signal. The people who accomplish extraordinary things within ordinary time constraints have learned to ruthlessly distinguish between the two. They ask a question that most people never ask. Of everything I could do today, what is the one thing that would create the most meaningful progress? Then they do that thing first, before the emails, before the meetings, before the small tasks pile up and steal their best hours. They feed the important before they feed the urgent. The second principle is what I call energy mapping. Your energy is not constant throughout the day. It rises and falls in predictable waves. Most people have a peak window of 2 to 4 hours where their focus is sharpest, their creativity is highest, and their thinking is clearest. For many people, this window's in the morning, but not for everyone. Some people peak in the late morning, some in the afternoon, some at night. The critical question is, do you know when your peak window is? And if you do, what are you doing during it? If you're spending your peak cognitive hours answering emails, sitting in meetings that could have been a message, or scrolling through updates, you're burning premium fuel on basic tasks. It's like using rocket fuel to heat your bath water. Map your energy. Pay attention for 1 week to when you feel most alert, most creative, most capable of deep thought. Then guard those hours with your life. Block them on your calendar. Turn off your phone. Close your email. Tell people you're unavailable. Use those sacred hours exclusively for your highest leverage work. The creative project, the strategic thinking, the skill development, the problem solving that actually moves the needle. Everything else, the administrative tasks, the routine communication, the shallow work that needs to happen but doesn't require your best self. Push it to the valleys. The hours when your brain is running at half speed are perfectly fine for clearing your inbox or organizing your files. This single adjustment, matching your best work to your best hours, can feel like you've been given an extra 3 hours in your day. You haven't. You've just stopped wasting the ones you had. The third principle is batching. Context switching, jumping between different types of tasks, is one of the most expensive things you can do with your attention. Every time you shift from writing to email to planning to a phone call and back to writing, your brain pays a tax. It takes time to re-engage, to remember where you were, to rebuild your focus. Research suggests these switching costs can eat up to 40% of your productive capacity. Batching means grouping similar activities together and doing them in dedicated blocks. All your email in one block, all your calls in another block, all your creative work in an uninterrupted stretch, all your meetings back-to-back on certain days, leaving other days completely clear for deep work. When you batch, you enter what psychologists call flow state, that beautiful condition where you're completely absorbed in the task, time seems to disappear, and you're producing your best work almost effortlessly. Flow doesn't happen when you're bouncing between 15 different things. It happens when you give one type of work your undivided attention for an extended period. The fourth principle is perhaps the hardest to implement and the most transformative when you do. Learning to say no. Every yes you give is a no to something else. When you say yes to a meeting that could have been an email, you're saying no to an hour of focused work. When you say yes to a project that doesn't align with your priorities, you're saying no to one that does. When you say yes to everyone else's agenda, you're saying no to your own. Most people say yes by default because saying no feels uncomfortable. It feels rude. It feels like you're letting someone down. But here's the uncomfortable math. If you say yes to everything, you're guaranteed to do nothing well. Your attention is spread so thin that nothing gets your best effort. You become a mile wide and an inch deep, technically present everywhere, but genuinely impactful nowhere. The people who accomplish remarkable things have learned to say no to almost everything, so they can say a full, committed, undiluted yes to the few things that truly matter. This doesn't mean being rude or unhelpful. It means having clear criteria for what deserves your time and having the courage to apply those criteria consistently, even when it disappoints people. A useful filter. Before saying yes to anything, ask yourself, if this opportunity didn't exist and I had to create it from scratch, would I? If the answer is no, then you're saying yes out of convenience or obligation, not out of genuine alignment with your priorities. And convenience-based yeses are the silent killers of meaningful progress. The fifth principle is time investing versus time spending. Most people spend time. They exchange hours for immediate results, and those results disappear. They work, get paid, spend the money, and start over next month. But some people invest time. They put hours into things that will continue generating returns long after the work is done. Writing a book is a time investment. You write it once, and it delivers value for years. Building a system at work is a time investment. You design it once, and it saves hours every week. Learning a skill is a time investment. You invest the learning time once, and the capability serves you for the rest of your career. Building a relationship is a time investment. The conversation takes an hour, but the connection might create value for decades. Every week, ask yourself, how much of my time this week was spent and how much was invested? If most of your time is spent, exchanged for immediate results that don't compound, you're on a treadmill, running hard, going nowhere. If a meaningful portion of your time is invested, creating capabilities, systems, and assets that compound over time, you're building a snowball that will eventually roll on its own momentum. The sixth principle is creating what I call white space. Most people fill every minute of their day with tasks, commitments, and input. There's no margin, no buffer, no room to breathe. And then they wonder why they feel overwhelmed, reactive, and perpetually behind. White space is unscheduled time that exists for thinking, processing, recovering, and responding to unexpected opportunities. It's the margin in the book that makes the text readable. Without it, everything runs together into an incomprehensible wall of obligation. The most effective people deliberately build white space into their schedules. They leave gaps between meetings. They protect one day per week for unstructured thinking. They don't fill every evening with plans. This isn't laziness, it's strategic architecture. White space is where your best ideas emerge, where unexpected opportunities get noticed, and where you recharge the cognitive battery that powers everything else. Your relationship with time isn't about cramming more into each day. It's about curating what deserves to be in your day and removing everything that doesn't. It's about matching your best energy to your best work, protecting your attention like the precious resource it is, and investing your hours in things that compound rather than evaporate. Master this, and you'll accomplish more in 12 months than most people accomplish in 12 years. Chapter 12. Rewriting Your Relationship with Money. Let's talk about money, not the way most people talk about it, in whispers with anxiety, wrapped in guilt or shame or some vague notion that wanting more of it makes you a bad person. Let's talk about it like two adults sitting across from each other at a kitchen table being honest about how money actually works and why most people's relationship with it is completely broken. First, let's dismantle a lie that's been sold to you since childhood. Money is not evil, wanting money is not greedy, and being wealthy does not require being a bad person. Money is a tool, like a hammer. A hammer can build a house or break a window. The hammer doesn't care. Money can feed your family, educate your children, support causes you believe in, and buy you the freedom to spend your days doing work that matters to you. Or it can be hoarded, misused, and weaponized. The money doesn't decide. You do. Once you clear away the moral confusion around money, you can start thinking about it clearly. And clear thinking about money is the first step toward actually building it. Here's the most fundamental shift you need to make. Stop thinking about money as something you earn, and start thinking about it as something you attract through value creation. When you think about earning money, you're stuck in a trading mindset. I trade my time for dollars. I trade my effort for a paycheck. This mindset has a hard ceiling because your time is limited. When you think about creating value, the ceiling disappears. You're no longer asking, how can I get paid more for my hours? You're asking, how can I solve bigger problems for more people? And the answer to that question often has nothing to do with how many hours you work. A software developer who builds a tool that helps 1,000 businesses doesn't work 1,000 times harder than someone with a regular job. They solve a problem once, and the solution scales. That's the difference between trading and creating. The second principle is understanding assets versus drains. Everything you spend money on falls into one of two categories: things that put money back into your life over time, and things that take money out of your life over time. The first category, assets, includes investments that generate returns, skills that increase your earning capacity, tools that make you more productive, and relationships that create opportunities. The second category, drains, includes everything that loses value over time, costs money to maintain, and doesn't generate any return. Most people spend most of their money on drains and wonder why they never build wealth. They buy the newest phone every year, finance a car they can't really afford, fill their closet with clothes they wear twice, and subscribe to 18 streaming services they barely watch. Each individual purchase seems harmless, but added together, they create a constant outflow that prevents wealth from ever accumulating. The people who build real wealth have flipped this ratio. They spend minimally on drains and aggressively on assets. They drive a modest car and invest the difference. They live in a smaller apartment and use the savings to build a portfolio. They skip the designer label and put that money into a course that increases their earning potential. They're not cheap. They're strategic. They spend freely on things that create long-term value and ruthlessly cut things that don't. The third principle is what I call the compound patience game. Most people want financial results immediately. They want to invest today and be rich tomorrow. They want to start saving and see millions in their account by next year. When the results don't come fast enough, they get discouraged, stop investing, and go back to spending. But building wealth is almost never fast. It's almost always slow, agonizingly, boringly, painfully slow. The people who build significant wealth understand this and make peace with it. They know that small, consistent contributions to their investments, month after month, year after year, decade after decade, will eventually create a snowball that grows on its own momentum. Someone who invests consistently starting in their mid-20s, even modest amounts, will almost certainly end up wealthier than someone who earns twice as much but starts investing 10 years later. That's not opinion. That's math. Compound growth is the most powerful force in personal finance, but it requires the one thing most people can't give it: patience. The fourth principle is income expansion over expense reduction. Don't get me wrong. Controlling your spending matters, but there's a floor to how much you can cut. You can only reduce your expenses so far before you're living on rice and sleeping in your car. There's no ceiling on how much you can earn. The people who build real wealth focus the majority of their financial energy on expanding their income rather than just reducing their spending. They develop skills that command higher compensation. They create products or services that generate revenue beyond their salary. They build side businesses that add income streams. They invest in their own capabilities because they understand that they are their most valuable financial asset. This doesn't mean ignoring expenses. It means recognizing that the real leverage is on the income side. A person who earns $50,000 and saves 20% has $10,000 to invest. A person who earns $150,000 and saves 20% has $30,000 to invest. Same percentage, 3 times the result. Expanding your income expands everything downstream. The fifth principle is building multiple streams. Relying on a single source of income is like building your house on a single pillar. If that pillar cracks, everything collapses. Most people's entire financial life depends on one paycheck from one employer. If they lose that job, their entire financial foundation disappears overnight. The people who build lasting financial security create multiple income streams: salary from their primary work, returns from investments, revenue from a side business, income from a rental property, royalties from intellectual property. Not all at once and not overnight, but intentionally and progressively, adding one stream at a time until their financial foundation rests on multiple pillars instead of one. Each additional income stream doesn't just add money, it adds security, flexibility, and peace of mind. When you know that losing your job wouldn't destroy you financially, you negotiate differently. You take risks differently. You make career decisions based on growth and fulfillment rather than fear and desperation. That psychological freedom alone is worth more than the additional income. The sixth principle, and this one ties the whole chapter together, is understanding that the ultimate purpose of wealth isn't accumulation. It's optionality. The real value of money isn't what it buys, it's what it allows. It allows you to choose work that matters to you instead of work that merely pays. It allows you to say no to opportunities that don't align with your values. It allows you to take risks that could lead to extraordinary outcomes. It allows you to be generous with people you care about. It allows you to invest your time in things that fulfill you, rather than things that merely sustain you. When you frame money as a tool for freedom rather than a scorecard for status, your entire relationship with it transforms. You stop spending to impress and start investing to liberate. You stop chasing more for the sake of more and start building enough to be free. And enough to be free is a very specific number, one that most people never calculate because they've never thought about money this clearly. So here's your homework from this chapter. Sit down and actually calculate your freedom number. How much monthly income from sources that don't require your daily effort would you need to cover your essential expenses? That number is your target. Everything you do financially should be moving you toward that number, because once you reach it, money stops being a cage and becomes a pair of wings. Chapter 13. Your body is the machine that runs everything. I need you to hear something that most ambitious people don't want to hear. You can have the sharpest mental models, the best decision-making frameworks, the most disciplined execution systems, and the most powerful network on the planet. And all of it becomes worthless if the machine running it breaks down. That machine is your body, and most people treat it like a rental car, driving it hard, ignoring the warning lights, skipping the maintenance, and then acting shocked when it stalls on the highway. Here's the irony that breaks my heart. The most driven people are often the worst at this. They sacrifice sleep to work more. They skip meals or eat garbage because they're too busy. They sit hunched over screens for 14 hours straight because they're grinding. They wear exhaustion like a badge of honor, bragging about their 4-hour sleep nights as if destroying their body is proof of their commitment. It's not commitment. It's sabotage. And I say this with genuine care. If you're doing this, you're not outworking anyone. You're outrunning a collapse. Your body is not separate from your ambition. It's the vehicle that carries your ambition. A sports car with an empty fuel tank and bald tires isn't impressive. It's useless. And that's what you become when you neglect your physical foundation. Your thinking gets foggy. Your emotions become volatile. Your creativity dries up. Your decisions get sloppy. Your discipline crumbles, not because you lack character, but because you've starved the system that produces character. Let's talk about the foundations, because they're embarrassingly simple and criminally neglected. Sleep. If I could tattoo one piece of advice on your forearm, it would be this: protect your sleep like your career depends on it, because it does. One night of poor sleep can cut your cognitive performance by a quarter, your ability to focus, to regulate your emotions, to think creatively, to make sound decisions. All of it degrades measurably after a bad night's rest. And the cruelest part? When you're sleep-deprived, you don't realize how impaired you are. You feel fine. You think you're operating normally, but you're not. You're driving with foggy glasses, and you can't tell the difference because the fog is inside your eyes. The people who perform at elite levels over sustained periods, not for a week-long sprint, but for years and decades, almost all prioritize sleep above nearly everything else. They create dark, cool rooms for sleeping. They follow consistent schedules. They stop caffeine by early afternoon. They power down screens before bed. They treat their sleep environment like a performance tool, not an afterthought, because they understand that an hour of well-rested work produces more than 3 hours of exhausted grinding. Nutrition. You don't need a degree in dietetics or a meal plan from a celebrity trainer. You need common sense applied consistently. Eat real food, things that grew from the ground or walked on it. Minimize the stuff that came from a factory. Notice how different foods make you feel. Some foods give you steady energy for hours, while others spike you up and crash you down within 30 minutes. Pay attention and adjust accordingly. The key insight about nutrition isn't about finding the perfect diet. It's about understanding that food is fuel, and the quality of your fuel directly determines the quality of your output. You wouldn't put cheap gasoline in a race car and expect it to perform. Stop putting cheap fuel in your body and expecting peak performance. Stay hydrated. This sounds almost insultingly basic, but mild dehydration, the kind most people walk around with every day, can impair concentration, reduce short-term memory, and increase fatigue. Keep water within arm's reach and drink throughout the day. It's the simplest performance optimization that exists, and most people still don't do it. Movement. Here's something that might reframe how you think about exercise. You don't exercise to look good. You exercise to think better. Physical activity increases blood flow to your brain, stimulates the growth of new neural connections, regulates the chemicals that control your mood, and builds your resilience to stress. Every single one of those benefits translates directly into better performance in your work, your relationships, and your decision-making. You don't need to train like a professional athlete. You need to move your body consistently in ways you can sustain for years. A 30-minute walk every day will do more for your long-term performance than an intense gym session you do twice and then abandon. Consistency always beats intensity. Find movement you actually enjoy. Walking, swimming, cycling, dancing, hiking, playing a sport, and do it regularly. The best exercise program is the one you'll actually follow. Now let me talk about something that doesn't get enough attention: stress cycling. Stress itself isn't the enemy. Your body is designed to handle stress. It's actually how you grow stronger. The problem isn't stress. The problem is stress without recovery. It's like lifting weights. The growth doesn't happen during a lift. It happens during a rest between lifts. If you lifted weights 24 hours a day without stopping, you wouldn't get stronger. Your muscles would literally tear apart. Your mind and body work the same way. You need periods of intensity followed by genuine recovery. Not recovery where you sit on the couch while answering emails and worrying about tomorrow. Real recovery. Walking in nature without your phone. Having a conversation that has nothing to do with work. Playing with a child or a pet. Sitting quietly with a cup of tea and nothing on your agenda. Sleeping deeply and waking naturally. The people who sustain high performance over decades aren't the ones who push hardest. They're the ones who've mastered the rhythm between pushing and recovering. They sprint when it's time to sprint and rest when it's time to rest. They don't feel guilty about resting because they understand that rest isn't the opposite of productivity. It's the prerequisite for it. Build your physical foundation not because some health guru told you to, but because everything else you're trying to build sits on top of it. Your ambition deserves a body that can carry it for the long haul. Chapter 14. Multiplying yourself through others. At some point on this journey, maybe you're already there, maybe it's coming soon, you'll hit a ceiling that no amount of personal optimization can break through. You'll realize that there are only so many hours you can work, only so many skills you can develop, only so many decisions you can make in a day. Your individual capacity, no matter how refined, has a limit. This is where everything shifts, because getting ahead of 99% of people isn't just about what you can do. It's about what you can inspire, enable, and multiply through others. Let me be clear about something. What I'm about to discuss isn't about manipulating people, accumulating power, or building a personal kingdom. It's about something much more interesting and much more sustainable. Learning to create value that extends beyond your direct effort. Learning to become the kind of person who makes everyone around them better. The greatest misconception about influence is that it comes from authority. People think that if they get the right title, the corner office, the management position, the followers, influence will automatically follow. It doesn't. We've all met people with impressive titles who couldn't influence a room temperature. And we've all met people with zero formal authority who somehow managed to change how everyone around them thinks, works, and shows up. The difference is what I call earned authority versus assigned authority. Assigned authority comes from a title. Earned authority comes from trust. And trust comes from one place: consistently creating value for others without keeping score. The first principle of multiplying yourself through others is what I call the service reversal. Most people climb into positions of influence and immediately start thinking about what others can do for them. How can my team make me look good? How can these connections benefit my career? How can I leverage these relationships for my goals? This self-focused approach creates transactional environments where people give the minimum required and withhold their best effort because they can sense they're being used as instruments rather than valued as people. Flip it, the infinite game. We've covered a lot of ground together, and if you're still here, still listening, still engaged, that tells me something important about you. It tells me you're not looking for a quick fix. You're not looking for a shortcut or a hack or some magical secret that lets you skip the hard parts. You're looking for the real path, and I respect that more than I can express. So let me give you the final piece, the one that holds everything else together. Getting ahead of 99% of people is not a finish line. There's no trophy at the end. There's no moment where you arrive, dust off your hands, and say, "Done. I made it. Time to coast." The people who think that way, the ones chasing a destination, eventually get there and feel emptier than they did at the starting line because they realize the destination was never the point. The journey was the point. The becoming was the point. The real game, the infinite game, is about continuous evolution. It's about waking up every morning with the quiet commitment to be slightly better than you were yesterday. Not dramatically better, not unrecognizably better, just a fraction of a degree closer to the person you're capable of becoming. The first truth about this infinite game is that what got you here won't get you there. The strategies that took you from 0 to 1 are different from the strategies that take you from 1 to 10. The mindset that helped you break out of mediocrity is different from the mindset that helps you sustain excellence. The people who stall out after initial success are almost always people who kept using the same playbook after the game changed. Stay a student. Always. No matter how much you know, no matter how much you've achieved, approach every day with what the Zen tradition calls beginner's mind, the openness, curiosity, and humility of someone who knows they have more to learn. The moment you think you've figured it all out is the moment you start falling behind, because the world doesn't stand still just because you do. The second truth is that you will need to reinvent yourself, probably more than once. The skills that made you valuable 5 years ago might not be the skills that make you valuable 5 years from now. The industry you're in might change. The market might shift. Technology might make your current approach obsolete. The people who thrive across decades aren't the ones who resist change. They're the ones who embrace it before it's forced upon them. Periodically, step back and ask yourself a brutally honest question. If I were starting from scratch today, with everything I know now, would I build the same life I currently have? If the answer is no, that's not a crisis. That's information. Use it to start making adjustments before the world makes them for you. The third truth is about building advantages that compound rather than decay. Some advantages are fragile. They work today, but might not work tomorrow. a specific piece of knowledge, a particular market condition, a temporary trend. Other advantages are durable. They get stronger over time. Deep relationships, broad skill sets, a reputation for integrity, the ability to learn quickly, emotional resilience. These compound advantages become more valuable as time passes, not less. Focus your energy on building durable advantages. They're harder to build and less exciting in the short term, but they create a foundation that supports you through every change, every challenge, and every reinvention you'll need to make. The fourth truth, and this might be the most important thing I say in this entire conversation, is that staying ahead requires staying connected to your why. When you're just starting out, motivation comes from hunger. You're hungry for better, hungry for more, hungry for change. That hunger is powerful fuel, but it burns out over time, especially as you start succeeding. The hunger fades because you're no longer starving. What replaces hunger is purpose, not a vague, abstract purpose that you read on a coffee mug, a real, lived, deeply felt sense of why your work matters beyond personal gain. Maybe it's the impact you create for others. Maybe it's the example you set for your children. Maybe it's the contribution you make to your community, your field, or the world. Whatever it is, find it and hold on to it tightly, because purpose is the only fuel that doesn't run out. The fifth truth is that this journey is not meant to be taken alone. Surround yourself with people who are on similar paths. People who challenge you, support you, call you out when you're slipping, and celebrate you when you're growing. The lone wolf narrative is romantic but unrealistic. The people who sustain excellence over long periods always have a community around them, mentors above, peers beside, and people they're lifting up below. And finally, here's what I want to leave you with. The fact that you listen to this entire conversation means something. It means the fire in you is real. It means the potential in you is genuine. It means you have what the vast majority of people don't, the willingness to invest time in becoming better. But information without implementation is just entertainment. Everything we've talked about, the mental operating systems, the invisible prisons, the confidence building, the execution engines, the habits, the learning, the relationships, the emotional mastery, the decision making, the time architecture, the financial intelligence, the physical optimization, the leadership, the long game. None of it matters if you close this and go back to doing exactly what you were doing before. So here's my challenge to you. Don't try to implement everything. Pick one chapter, the one that hit you the hardest, the one where you thought, that's me, that's exactly what I need to change. Start there, start today, not Monday, not next month. Today, one small action that moves you 1 inch closer to the person you're becoming. Because here's the beautiful truth that makes all of this worth it. You don't have to change everything to change everything. You just have to start. One habit, one decision, one conversation, one morning where you choose differently. That's all it takes to set a completely new trajectory. One that leads somewhere so far from where you are now that the person you'll become wouldn't even recognize the person you are today. And that person, the future you, the one who took this seriously, who did the work, who showed up day after day when nobody was watching, that person is already grateful that you made this choice right here, right now, Today, go build something extraordinary. You've got everything you need.